everyone, I'm Rose Martin, and we are right around the corner in beautiful Eggleston, Virginia with Anne Getty. You might know her by her pen name, Anne Goethe. We'll figure that out in a few minutes. She's not only a novelist, but she's also a playwright, and we're going to talk about not only her poetry, not only her book Midnight Lemonade, but her book Goner, the story of four sisters, wonderful family drama, and this Southern story was written from the heart. So Anne, welcome to Right Around the Corner.
Thank you. Welcome to my house.
Oh, and tell us about this beautiful location and this beautiful home.
Well, in a way, it sort of began with Midnight Lemonade, my first novel, which was published a very long time ago. But the story of finding this land, I grew up in the Mississippi, and so I have a really profound love for rivers. And the only probably huge ambition I ever had in my life was to live on a river. So many, many years ago, 30 years ago, friends and I were canoeing. This is a peninsula. We were canoeing. We came around, and there was a little sandy beach with a for sale sign leaning on it. So we pulled our canoes up and walked up, and instead of railroad tracks, there were beautiful bottomlands, and it was just too beautiful. So I said, I'm going to stay in the boat because I don't want to see this land. Someone's going to buy it who wouldn't love it the way I would love it. So I literally went back to the boat, and the friends walked around the land, and when we got back to Blacksburg, they called the realtor, and it was about 16 acres of land, and it was for sale for $80,000. And at that time, if it had been for sale for $500, I couldn't have bought it. I was really poor. So I think the land sold in maybe a week or two after that. And about 2 years later, Midnight Lemonade, out of nowhere, went up for auction, sold for a great deal of money.
And congratulations.
Well, thank you. It changed my life forever and ever. But anyway, right after that, a dear friend who'd been in the canoes called and said, too bad, you know, that land's not for sale now. And I said, well, Diane, if we were meant to have it, we'd have it. And this is true. Within an hour, the phone rang, and it was a realtor. And the Roanoke Times had done a big spread on the sale of Midnight Lemonade. He said, Anne, are you still interested in land on the river? And I said, yeah. He said, there's this place that's about to come up for sale. Or will you be at this number? And he called back a little bit later, and he picked me up, and we drove here. And approaching the land by land, I didn't recognize it till we walked out on that little sandy beach. And the only difference in those 2 years or whatever is instead of the land being 16 acres for sale for $80,000, it was 16 acres and a 4-acre island for sale for $40,000.
Wow, it was meant to be.
And I bought the land on the beach. I signed the papers, and I always felt it was meant to be. And so that was sort of how we found this place. And then my husband and I bought a little more land, and finally this piece high enough to build a house. And we knew when we built it that we wanted to honor the land. We didn't want the house to intrude. So no trees were cut along the river. You can't see the house in the summer. And it's built of stone to sort of match the cliffs that are across the river. Long answer, right?
Well, it's breathtaking, and you can tell that it was built with so much love.
It was.
And I think about the house as a reflection of so much love and care that you put into it, just like your work. And you started writing at the age of 3, and you were published by 10 or 15?
I think I maybe published a thing or two as a teen. At 3, I couldn't read, but I knew I wanted to be a writer. We were a very booky family. Our parents read to us a lot. And I remember pretending to be a writer, having a pencil and a little piece of paper and pretending to be a writer. But I guess I seriously began at about age 10. I think I remember my first poem began, the world is round, oh so round, it isn't all earth and it isn't all ground. And I don't remember the rest.
But you remember that much.
I was 10, and my mother got me a notebook to write my poems in, and I felt so important. So that was the beginning. And then I went to a boarding school where It was a very literary place. And so I'd been writing since I was 10, but it was kind of private. And we had a writing assignment our first or second English class. And then the next day, the nun came in holding my story over her head. And just she was so excited about it. And that was when I thought, I'm a writer. And she read my story out loud to the class. And I couldn't wait to get my paper back. And she'd given me an F.
Ooh.
Yeah. Spelling, punctuation, penmanship, everything was FFF, but she really liked my story.
A+ on content, A+ on creativity.
A+++.
Yes,
Yeah.
on all the others.
yeah.
So you grew up in a literary family. Your dad was a storyteller, right?
Well,
And
he
Mom
was
and-
a storyteller. Our mother was a journalist, and we just had a lot of books in our house. We didn't have a lot of music, we didn't have a lot of art, but we had a lot of books and a lot of poetry. So we, knew lots of poems by heart when we were kids, and probably still remember a lot of them. And when the sisters get together, we interrupt one another with Kipling lines and things like, so.
So your sisters are also writers.
Everybody in my family writes, and they all write well. I have one sister who has pursued writing. She has taught writing a lot, and writes, and she has published some poetry, and she has been working for a very long time on a wonderful memoir. The other two sisters, I should save all their emails because they're good writers, but that's not where they're great.
Their passion,
Yeah.
Not where their passion is.
And we're all big readers still.
Well, and growing up like that, I'm sure was wonderful exposure for early literacy. And you've done so much work in early literacy that we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you have a love of poetry, and that's really is that really the first love beyond the novels and the plays and the short stories?
Yes, I probably have maybe been more successful with my prose, but I think it was New Year's Day 2012. I woke up that day and I said, I will write a poem every day of this coming year. So I wrote a poem every single day, and some days 2 or 3, and everything I looked at was material for a poem. And I guess at the end of that year, I probably had 200 pages of poetry. And then the next year, I continued with that. So it's like a record of those 2 years. And then I submitted part of them to a contest publisher thing and got a little book out of it, this little Riverbow book. So I have poems that have appeared in journals or things, but this is the only little book of poetry. So at the end of those 2 years of writing poems, and they were in my head all the time. My little grandsons would, trip on a rock or something, and it would
turned into a poem.
a poem in my heart. But and then on New Year's Day, I guess 2015, I thought, I'm a fiction writer, and I'm going to write my last novel. And I started writing Goner on New Year's Day, and I guess I finished the first draft about 6 months later. So that was where Goner came from, and I don't think I've written a poem since.
So you maybe got all that out of your system,
Maybe
right?
Maybe so.
A lot of stuff to
Yeah.
write about and have, and you published a few of them. Do you still have all those poems you wrote?
Yes, I hope I do. But and sometimes I feel, and part of that is living in this really beautiful place, and Giles County is such an interesting place, and we have formed or become part of such a fascinating and challenging community that sometimes I think that I've said what I have to say, but I just haven't done everything I need to do. So,
What makes it so special here in Giles?
well, part of it is the very natural beauty of the place, and I guess historically it was pretty isolated until 460, Highway 460, and there is, it's become a very innovative place in the past few years, and we've been part of that we have a group called the Renew the New that we formed about 13 years ago, and our, we're doing the stewardship of the 37 miles that run through this county. So the natural beauty in Giles is just incredible, and the tenacity of the different communities. And, I appreciate that we've entered here, that we've come in. I've only lived in Giles County for 14 years, but to have been accepted, and I feel accepted, and to have learned how to listen. And we do a lot of work in early childhood. Giles County has a 47% poverty rate. So because of what's happened in the Appalachians over the years, there are a lot of challenges for the people here. And our little group, the Giles Early Education Project, we feel that we can help with the culture of this county and making it a better and stronger place by beginning with our youngest citizens. So we do a lot of work with them, and we put out a book of poetry. And the idea of our book is to give the children of the county a sense of identity. So I was reading in one of the VPI Virginia Preschool Initiative classrooms. So the day our book came out and was distributed by Giles County, the county is so eager to do so many very interesting things. So I was reading the book to my little girl, and came to See Us for the Cascades.
Oh.
And she said, "We got a waterfall?"
Oh.
And I said, "Yeah, honey, and it's about 5 miles from your school."
And you're teaching them to be good stewards too, but through your example. You're taking care of the land, you're taking care of each other, and you're sharing that. And that's a really wonderful gift that you're passing on. You had said that you've written, but you haven't done everything yet you think you want to do. What's on that list?
Well, on that list is continuing to do this work in early childhood and trying to find all those babies who might get lost, falling through the cracks. So a real interest and dedication to that. And the people of the county are very open to new ideas and new ways to be involved in the community and the culture, and of course, the magnificent nature.
Well, and your work has taken on so many different ideas and has impacted so many different people, because you've done the work with the preschool, we've talked about the poetry, but you've also had a play that was performed as a playwright, and then you also had, through the Middle School Association, right, you had a movie made through one of yours.
Right, and that was back in Blacksburg. So when my children started school, I don't bake, so I couldn't do the cookie thing, and I'm a pretty fast driver, so people don't really want their children in my car.
Carpool with you.
So
yeah, you're not in
carpooling wasn't there. So I started creating plays with my children's classrooms, and we would perform them. And then when 2 of my children were in middle school, I wrote with a composer a musical called Coming of Age about the heartaches and hopes of middle schoolers. I love that little age group, they're little like wet clay. So somehow or another, the word of that play spread, and the National Association of Secondary School Principals ended up making a film of it and publishing it. And I think that play was performed hundreds and hundreds of times throughout the United States, and it just, was really, because I don't bake cookies.
Wow, to think all of that grew out of just not baking cookies.
Not baking cookies.
Well,
so we did a few more teen musicals, and one more was published, and so it was good, proud work. And then my kids grew up, and then I wrote Midnight Lemonade, and just sort of changed courses.
Well, and it seems like no matter what it is about your life, you embrace it full on, just 100%. I love one of the things I read on your blog, that you were talking about aging. And you said, when I was 30, I could climb to the top of a branching oak tree, compete in pogo stick races, and dance all night. My tan skin was smooth, my eyebrows high, my hair glossy thick, and my 3 beloved children were precocious, funny, unpredictable toddlers. Now at 70, I gaze longingly into low-hanging branches with no more mount a pogo stick than jam a knitting needle in my eye. I'm good for maybe 3 fast dances before oxygen deprivation starts in. But I think it's wonderful, and what a message to people that no matter where you are in that point in life, just like greet it, embrace it, and great things can happen. That's so inspiring.
I have just loved being an old woman. And, sometimes I try to figure out why I like it so much. And maybe it's because, well, one, you've made it, because consider the alternative. And there's not a lot of longevity in my family. So for my 70th birthday, it was a long weekend of celebrations. It was like arriving someplace. And so I know that it's hard if you have health problems, and I've been fortunate so far. But otherwise, I think I have a friend who every time I would see him, he would say, "Hello, young lady." And I'd go, "Jeff, I'm not a young lady." "Oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are." And I kept saying, "I'm not. I'm 70 years old, Jeff." "Oh, no, you're not." And the thing is, we are what we are. And if you live to be old, then you are blessed.
Right.
And there's so much that I wanted to do in my life, and I've been able to do it. I'm so grateful for that.
Well, and reading your work, I'm grateful that you experimented in so many different genres. And you had mentioned earlier that 2015 you decided Goner was going to be the last novel. And there was quite a time span between Midnight Lemonade and Goner. Why such a long wait?
I would love to say because I was being deep and thoughtful, but I signed a very lucrative contract, and it involved producing a second novel. So when I wrote Midnight Lemonade, I wrote the whole book with the rewrites, took about 7 weeks.
Which is quick.
It's very quick. And what happened to it was, I know many writers who are such better writers than I am, and they just never had that particular break that I had. But anyway, so there was, the book went up for auction, and a lot of publishers wanted it, and the publisher that we went with paid a lot of money for this and the rights to my second novel. And I think part of what happened for me was it stopped being what came from my heart, and it became a business deal. So I wrote 2 or 3 second novels before they... And then I kept the same agent who was very powerful and made all the difference. And so I wrote 2 more novels after my contract ended, and one at the request of a friend who had been in Auschwitz, and he asked me to write his story. So I did, and I wrote the book, and his daughter said, this story would just kill my mother. So I put it away. And when John's wife died a few years later, I sent the manuscript to my agent. And she thought it was well written, but she felt that because I am not Jewish, I did not have the authority to write the story. So I put that manuscript away. And then I'm originally from Louisiana, and when I have a son who lives in New Orleans, and when his son was about a month old, Katrina hit New Orleans. And that was just such a major American city closed down for 2 months. And I went into New Orleans with the Red Cross, and it was just, I kept going back to New Orleans, going back to see the baby once they moved back, but just to watch the city, something that had been erased, slowly come back. I tried to write about it. And once again, my agent did not like that book, and maybe it wasn't a strong enough book. Maybe I was too emotional sometimes.
Let's talk about Goner, because
Okay.
that's also an emotional story, and this also is a finalist for Indie Awards and other awards, so congratulations for that.
Thank you.
But
Thank
set
you.
in the South with these four sisters who one's narrating. I have to tell you, the very first line of the prologue just grabbed me that I had to sit for a second and think about it, because, you know, we are all caretakers of echoes. And I thought, wow, we are all caretakers of echoes. And the story here, that it being based in truth with you and your sisters, it grabs you from the beginning. And so I was fascinated with so many facets of it where, I don't know, you'd think that the sisters getting back together on, you know, when they're saying goodbye to their dad would be only heartbreaking. But you found a way to not make it just that.
Thank you, thank you. I think there's probably a tradition in Southern literature of returning to the home place. Eudora Welty, and who was the wonderful playwright who wrote about, I think it was sisters coming back for a funeral. So it's a good unifying theme and a way to go back and forth. And one of the things I explore in Goner is, you know, actually who has the authority to tell a story. So part of it is written in first person and part of it is in third person. And then at the end of the novel, I play with the concept of what happens to a story with a narrator if the narrator never existed. So that whole concept. And so I have a sister writing a memoir with the same storyline in part. So it's made me think a lot about the difference between a memoir and a novel.
Well, and I love the fact that you'll take the parents and take us back into 1940 and their courtship and their love and the heartbreak. Would you be willing to read some of it for us?
Sure. You know, children have no idea of the private life of their parents. I mean, by virtue of being a child, you're egocentric. And so you can't even imagine a world that you're not in. So part of that is that, but let me read the prologue that you mentioned, Rose, and it starts with, "We are the caretakers of echoes. Our father is dying, blinking and bewildered as a newborn in these last days. Sometimes he is in his boyhood home and the sailor-suited days of the early century. With all of life ahead, he cannot find his mother. She will not hear his ravished whispers. Daughters come instead. We too have lost a mother, are calling her. No mother comes. We are the lost children of lost parents, passing ourselves in a hall of whispers." And then it says, in this story, it is March 1980, and then it changes into first person. "It is only when we are all together that we feel complete. There is no one in the world I know as well as I know the three women in this story. No lover, no child could ever be so close, so blood-bounded." And you know, that's true of your siblings.
Absolutely. And you think about that, right? Because those bonds, you know each other's whole story, to whereas those other people that you mentioned, they don't.
Right. And when you become orphaned, which is more the natural order of things, if you have siblings, they're the only people who know who you were when you were 3 or 7 or 4.
What's next? What's the next project?
The next project. I would like to perhaps get back to writing in a different way, not the genre of poetry, and not another novel. I think another novel, you know, you live in that world. You know, I wrote John's story and I wrote the Katrina story, and I'm proud of them. I'm glad I have those, but I would like maybe just to keep a record of what is going on here by the river.
Sounds wonderful, and I can't wait to read it. Thank you so much for having us here to your beautiful home and for sharing your story. It's been a delight, and I'm so grateful that you did that, so thank you.
How nice of you to come. Thank you
Well,
so
and
much.
I'd like to just thank again Anne for inviting us into her home, and Getty for community members, and Goethe for those of you who know her by her pen name. If you'd like to learn more about Anne, more of her work, we're going to be having an extended conversation online. Make sure to check that out. And also to all of you for watching, I'm very grateful. Tell all of your friends about us, and I can't wait to see you next time. You don't know where we're going to be, right? Right around the corner.
Production funding for Right Around the Corner provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Anne Ray Foundation, and by viewers like you. Thank you.